Terima kasih banyak atas kehadiran semua dan terutama terima kasih banyak kepada Dr. Jonathan Smith. Pak Jonathan, is it okay if I speak bahasa Indonesia?
Oh ya bisa
Oh,
Bumi
bisa.
ya, terima kasih. Ya ya bisa.
Bisa
Terima
ya.
kasih ya atas undangan ya.
Baik, baik, baik. Terima kasih banyak. Nah, selamat datang semuanya. Saya Mia Siskawati, Kaprodi Kajian Gender, Sekolah Kajian Strategik dan Global Universitas Indonesia. Dan bersama ini hadir bersama kita ada Profesor Dr. Supriyatna yang merupakan Direktur Sekolah Kajian Strategik dan Global Universitas Indonesia. Untuk bisa memulai acara ini, kami persilahkan Prof. Supriyatna untuk berkenan membuka acara ini. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Mia. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Selamat siang, salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Terima kasih Bu Mia dan saya hormati Dr. Jonathan Smith ya dari University Leeds. Selamat datang pada kegiatan diskusi publik ini yang diselenggarakan oleh program studi Gender, Sekolah Kajian Strategi dan Global UI. Pendekatan interseksional dalam riset gender telah menjadi kerangka penting dalam memahami kompleksitas ketidaksetaraan sosial dan pengalaman hidup kelompok yang terpinggirkan. Tantangan utama yang masih dihadapi pada konsep interseksionalitas adalah bagaimana mengoperasionalkan pendekatan ini dalam metodologi riset. Banyak penelitian masih bersifat normatif dan elitis, tidak cukup memberikan ruang bagi suara komunitas yang diteliti atau gagal menjembatani antara riset akademik dan perubahan sosial yang nyata di masyarakat. Oleh karena itu, pendekatan kreatif dan partisipatif seperti Feminist Participatory Action Research (FPER) mulai dikembangkan sebagai alternatif. Program Studi Kajian Gender (SKSGUI) menghadirkan rangkaian diskusi publik tentang kreativitas dan aktivisme dalam riset gender interseksional sebagai respon terhadap kebutuhan untuk mempertemukan berbagai pendekatan dalam satu ruang pembelajaran kolektif. Diskusi ini akan menampilkan praktek riset dari lintas konteks, mulai dari riset aksi kreatif di wilayah bencana, gerakan ekofeminis berbagai kepercayaan dan spiritualitas, hingga keterlibatan digital perempuan muda. Materi ini adalah hari ini tentang eco-religion dan eco-religion and ecofeminism activism yang akan dibawakan oleh Bapak Dr. Jonathan Smith. Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah. Yes, provide this material sebagai peneliti dari University of Leeds dan saat ini sebagai dosen tamu CRGS Universitas Gajah Mada ya. Berarti tinggal di Jogja sekarang ya, Pak Jonathan ya.
Ya betul Prof. Betul.
Ya, thank you. Selamat berdiskusi dan kolaborasi lintas bidang antar akademisi, aktivis, seniman, dan komunitas untuk mengembangkan metode riset dan transformatif dan berbagai berdampak sosial masyarakat. Mungkin ini penting sekali. Saya rasa Indonesia mungkin harus banyak belajar ya dari negara-negara Barat, ya, terutama berhubungan dengan tema ini. Baik, sekali lagi terima kasih kepada para peserta, kemudian juga Prodi Gender Bumia ya, berkarya terus ya, dan kepada sekali lagi terima kasih pada Dr. Jonathan Smith. Mudah-mudahan acaranya berlangsung lancar dan diskusinya nanti bisa menarik. Terima kasih, selamat siang. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih banyak
Selamat
Prof.
siang.
Supriyatna yang telah berkenan membuka acara ini. Nah, sebelum kita lanjutkan, saya ingin memperkenalkan moderator kita, yaitu Mbak Andi Misbahul Pratiwi, yang beliau merupakan kandidat doktor di University of Leeds, Inggris, dan saat ini juga menjadi peneliti tamu di Prodi Kajian Gender ya, Mbak Andi sedang mengerjakan disertasi S3-nya terkait dengan mempelajari bagaimana para perempuan di wilayah pesisir utara Jawa kemudian merespon terutama bencana ekologis yang dihadapinya. Nah, Mbak Andi akan menjadi moderator kita hari ini dan akan memperkenalkan Dr. Jonathan Smith. Silakan Mbak Andi, waktu dan tempat kami persilahkan.
Terima kasih Mbak Mia. Thank you, Dr. Mia Siskowati for the introductions, and also thank you for Professor Supriyatna for your warmth and encouraging remarks. Good afternoon, everyone. I will try to moderate today's discussions with English, but no worries. Dr. Jonathan able to speak in Bahasa a bit. So in Q&A session or in a discussion session later, all of you can, ask or give a comment in Bahasa Indonesia also. My name is Andi. As Dr. Mia already introduced me, I'm currently a visiting researcher at the University of Indonesia, and I'm honored to be a moderator for today's sessions. So today's discussions will focus on a timely and important theme, eco-religion and eco-feminist activism. And then we are truly delighted to have with us Dr. Jonathan Smith. He's a researcher whose work on intersections of religious diversity and social movement in multicultural societies. Dr. Jonathan completed his PhD in theology and religious studies at the University of Leeds, where he's currently as a visiting researcher fellow at the Center for Religion and Public Life in University of Leeds. His research focuses on how religious groups participate in social movement and respond to share social and environmental challenges that can be complex, unexpected, and transformative. As Dr. Mia already introduced also, Dr. Smith is currently at the 50th lecture at the Center for Religious and Cross-Cultural Studies, University of Gajah Mada, or Universitas Gajah Mada. And in this talk, Dr. Jonathan will present his work on intersections of ecology, religion, and feminist activism, with a strong focus on grassroots movement and knowledge productions. So everyone, today's session will run around 2 hours, and then we will begin with 45 minutes presentations from Dr. Jonathan, or I usually call Pak Jo, yeah, and then we will have a Q&A session and an open discussions. And then you can type your questions in the chat box or use the raise hand feature during the discussions, right? And then before we process the discussions, it's a gentle reminder, this webinar room is an inclusive space. We encourage openness, active listening, and respectful engagement with others, and experiences. Let's support thoughtful and safe environment for everyone. Right. Without further ado, I'll welcome Dr. Jonathan. The screen is yours, Pak Jo.
Okay, thank you. Selamat siang semuanya, everyone. Bapak, Ibu, Mbak Mas, and thank you so much. Terima kasih banyak Mbak Andi and Bu Mia for the invitation, and also to Pak Supriyatna for the really excellent introduction. Mungkin mulai sambutan kecil di sambutan pendek di bahasa Indonesia, because I see that kebanyakan orang yang hadir di hari ini mungkin bisa bicara bahasa Indonesia, dan saya mau mulai dengan mungkin saya merasa dikit kecewa, but dikit di presentasi hari ini karena saya lihat di yang peserta di dalam Zoom room ada Pak Andi, ada Bu Mia, ada Bu Dewi Chandraningrum, ada banyak orang yang bisa bicara tentang tema ekofeminisme, banyak lebih lancar dan baik daripada saya. Saya tidak di sini seperti ahli tentang ekofeminisme, juga tentang tentang agama juga. Saya dari luar, lahir Amerika Serikat, tapi sudah 3 tahun tinggal di Indonesia, so masih belajar. So I just dari awal mau bicara mohon maaf in advance for kesalahan and my mistakes. I hope we can learn together in the discussion, and I want to share just some reflections from my research, and then hopefully we can have a good discussion together. So thank you so much for inviting me. And I will go ahead and share my screen, I think. Okay. Okay, can you see the presentation? Is it just the presentation or the notes as well?
No, just the presentation.
Oh, great. Okay, good. It's working. Sometimes the technology is tricky. All right, great. Okay, so I will try to mostly present in Indonesian. Maaf, mungkin bahasa Indonesia belum cukup lancar untuk bicara 100% bahasa Indonesia, but also hopefully you can understand some things, and then we can also bisa berdiskusi lagi menggunakan bahasa Indonesia juga. Good. So yes, thank you. So let's just start with the opening question. How are religion, ecology, and feminism related to each other? And I've been thinking about this question during my research over the last couple of years. And also I was thinking about it last week when I saw the discussion, which I know many of you saw, the debate between the head of NU and a representative of Greenpeace that happened last week. And some of the debate centered around the question of how do we look at nature? Is mining or nature, can it be considered anugerah? Can it be considered a gift from God for us? Or could it be considered maybe a different way, that maybe if we're creating environmental damage through nickel mining in Raja Ampat, then this actually is not an example of anugerah. Maybe it's actually environmental damage. So this raises a lot of questions about what is religion, what is environmentalism, and how do they relate together? So I think what I want to try to talk in this discussion a bit is to talk about two aspects. One is a little bit about what we've learned in our research about eco-religion in Indonesia. And then secondly, looking at ecofeminism, specifically looking at it as potentially an ethical framework that can help us to examine and look at eco-religion in a kind of new way. So let's start with eco-religion and what we call religious creativity. For a couple of years, and since then I've continued, but been doing research with my colleagues at the Pusat Studi Agama dan Lintas Budaya, Center for Religious and Cross-Cultural Studies at Universitas Gadjah Mada, with Ronald Adam, who is an alumni of our program and also is a lecturer at UIN Jakarta, and also with Samsul Marif, also known as Mas Ancu, who is the director of the center. And we've been doing research about how do environmental movements in Indonesia use religion and culture in creative ways. So we've done that by examining existing movements, also by conducting interviews with experts and people involved in movements. And also we've been doing an ethnography with a grassroots community movement called Komunitas Rasan in Gunung Kidul in Yogyakarta. And all of this is to try to understand this question about what is eco-religion in Indonesia and how does it relate to environmental activism or religious creativity. So I'll explain a little bit about that. As we know, unfortunately, I couldn't attend the talk last a couple of weeks ago where Mbak Andi spoke, but as I know her example shows in her really good research, our environment is changing rapidly and local communities are facing new and difficult environmental changes and crises, such as people who are in fishing communities in the north of Java. And as Mbak Andi's research shows, that crisis affects marginalized people and groups more than others. So everyone is affected, but some people are affected more, and especially people who are disadvantaged or marginalized in society. And then because of that, we use this term or this approach to looking at these environmental challenges, which is called religious creativity. And it's recognizing, I come from the perspective of sociology of religion, or sociology, which tries to look at, how people practice their religion more than about the theology or the beliefs, but how they sort of work out in practice. And from the perspective of a sociology of religion, we can say there is a ambivalent role of religion and how communities respond to environmental crises. So there can be many types of responses. Some can be positive, some can be negative, they can be a mixture of both. But one response that we look at is what we call religious creativity. And what this means is inventing new ways of living by reframing and adapting beliefs to address environmental challenges. And this comes from a religious studies scholar named Willis Jenkins at the University of Virginia. And we've been trying to take this approach and see how it fits with what happens in environmental action in Indonesia. So in order to clarify that, we should at first clarify what we mean by religion, because people in religious studies, we always debate about what is religion. So just to clarify, when we were talking about religion in today, and when I'm speaking about it, I'm talking about what we looked at as lived religion. So not the official religion that's determined by governments or institutions, and not the expert religion that may be determined by scholars or by religious leaders or by people who have much more training than me in religion, but really how people live religion in their local and daily practices more than the doctrines or the institutional forms of religion. And in Indonesia, what we found in our research, very interesting, I think, that there's so many resources within religion that people use in order to face environmental crises. And we found kind of 3 different types. These types are not separate from each other. They're all kind of connected, but we want to include all of them in how we look at lived religion. One of them is what we would call the lived and daily religious beliefs and practices, or the kehidupan atau praktik beragama sehari-hari of the, quote, recognized religions. So the 6 recognized religions, and of course now kepercayaan or penghayat kepercayaan is also, or indigenous religion might be considered a new recognized religion, but still contested. So there's this sense of the practices of people in their official or recognized religions. But also we have the sistem dan nilai masyarakat adat, or the systems and values of communities that are connected to distinct locations, taking care of a specific coastline or river or mountain or farmland that communities may take care of using a set of beliefs and values and systems. And then a third category, which is very big in Indonesia, is what we would call kepercayaan, tradisi, dan kearifan lokal. So what is the sort of local beliefs, traditions, and wisdom, which kind of can be connected to religion or culture or tradition, but they are really useful in how people respond to environmental challenges. And for an example of that, we found in our research of the 208 social movements that we looked at in Indonesia between the years 1990 and 2022, we found 571 distinct items of this type of religious content that was being used. And this included religious concepts, this included religious and adat practices like selamatan or sedekah sampah, istighosah, which are quite commonly used by environmental movements in Indonesia and by different ritual groups. And then we also have rituals, which are used by many different communities, both public and within religious communities. And then we have these bigger systems, which are systems, often they are adat or customary systems, which are used to manage land or property. But often they can be a mixture. They can be used by by farmers. They can be used by people taking care of coastlines. So there are these larger systems like SASI, which is a system we might talk about later. So the way then that religious creativity works in our model is that what happens is a community is first they are responding to a new environmental problem within a specific socio-religious context. So as Mbak Andi said, starting from a local perspective, if you live in Pekalongan, then you have an environmental issue around coastal flooding, and maybe also around landslides. So that's the issue that you're responding to. Whereas if you live in Sumba, you might be having an issue with drought because of the change of the climate, and you're having to deal with that. So it depends on the issue that you're facing in your specific context. And then what happens is that the communities then use the existing religious and cultural resources which they have available to them. And using those, they innovate new eco-religious beliefs and practices using their own sense of ethics and approach to how they go about it. So to give an example of what that looks like, everyone talks a lot. I mean, it's a big issue in Indonesia about the issue of waste. And that's clogging a lot of rivers and coastlines, and there are different initiatives to try to address that. One way that Muslim communities have tried to address it is by looking at these terms, what are called the 3R terms: reduce, reuse, recycle. And these terms can be used in a very individual way, sort of how we want to live individually. But it's interesting in studies that we reviewed in our research that some pesantren, Islamic boarding schools, they actually make the argument that their way of living is actually an example of the reduce side. Usually when we talk about dealing with waste, people focus only on the recycle, maybe the reuse, but definitely the recycle. But they're actually thinking about reducing. So what does it mean to have a lifestyle that is not based on purchasing and buying, not having so many clothes, not using so much water? How does a life of reduction, what does that teach us about how to live well with God and with nature? And another concept which is used often, and some of you may have heard of, is called sedekah sampah. And some people also use a term that I've heard before, which is called a sampah adalah berkah, or sampah, or waste, as being a blessing. And sedekah sampah, interestingly, is the idea that you instead of giving sedekah or giving to as a religious encouragement or obligation to give to support religious communities, to support people in need, sedekah could also be giving your waste. So bringing your bottles to the mosque, and then there will be a recycling program. And the recycling program will raise money, which will then go into supporting the mosque. So it's trying to say, is there a way we can look at sampah differently, as being sedekah or as being even a type of blessing, rather than being something that's dirty or something that we just shift and push to one side. And there's an interesting case also, which I would love to talk about in more detail, but I don't have time, about a community in Semarang who actually used this term, a community of pemulung, of waste pickers, waste managers, who actually look at themselves as being they are being blessed people because they deal with sampah. So they look at their lives as being a religious obligation. By taking care of sampah, they are actually doing sedekah with their whole lives. And this is also a response to how pemulung, or these communities, are often marginalized in society as being, poorer and also less considered to be connected with the idea of being unclean because of their connection with waste. So they reframe this as being, they are kind of the protectors, or the ones who are doing sedekah. Their lives are lives of sedekah. And so it's an interesting way of reframing this. So this is what we mean by religious creativity. But then how does this religious creativity fit with the idea of ethics, of, how do we deal with the differences in how we look at the environment and how we should treat the environment? So what we found in the social movements in Indonesia is that they use this, what we call a dynamic process of improvisational synthesis. What it means is that they're improvising, they're creating, they're mixing between different religious ideas, different cultural concepts, different traditions, and also between economic and ecological ideas. And this is what we call this idea of, we call lived eco-religion. So how they sort of take economics and theology or beliefs and culture and science and ecology, and sort of kind of put them together in a creative way and kind of make something new. But as we know, creativity is not just a good process. Creativity can be positive, but also can be negative. So, for example, as we know, within Muslim communities, there's the debate about, what can be considered ijtihad, which is, I'm not an Islamic scholar, so forgive me if I get something wrong here, but what could be considered, a useful innovation which will improve how we live our lives, and what could be bid'ah, or what could be considered an innovation that takes us outside of the proper practice of Islam. And then we come to the question, which is, a common debate within Indonesia about this idea of local wisdom, or kearifan lokal. Is it in some ways consistent with religion? Do these practices maybe smuggle in some ways of living which are not religious, or might challenge religion, or can they be lived together with religion? And so there's this constant debate about whether, the rituals and practices of local wisdom are actually consistent with religious teaching, or if they may or be more of an innovation that should be looked upon with some suspicion. So what this tells us is that the type of eco-religion that we have, that forms and that develops, depends on the religious and cultural ethics that are used by the community in the creative process. So their own framework, their own perspective, is what will determine, what type of eco-religion is created or developed. And to explain that, I want to introduce you to two really interesting cases that we had in our study. These are cases that are about two different ecological movements involving Kiai. And as I'm sure everyone here knows, that Kiai are the sort of religious leaders of pesantren and other religious communities. And they have a specific kind of role in Indonesian society, and especially in Javanese societies and Sundanese, where they can really present a kind of representation of a proper way of living, and they incorporate that into their own ways of living, ways of being, and also ways of teaching that go through pesantren and other institutions. And in one area in Paneglang in Banten, there was a case about 10 years ago of a water bottling plant that wanted to use a specific area to collect water for its water bottling. Unfortunately, that area also was an area which included some sacred sites to the community, including the graves of some saints, also some sacred springs, and other ones that were really connected to community life. And so there was a Kiai in Paneglang who joined this resistance movement against the water bottling plant, along with environmental activists, along with farmers and other groups, and stood out as kind of a representative of the movement. And they actually, not only did they do demonstrations and istigosa and a lot of religious kind of activities, but they also occupied the land that was going to be taken and sort of said, no, this is a land for our community. It can't be taken and captured by a corporation. The land belongs to us as a community. And as a result of their activism, the water bottling plant project was taken away or removed by the government. So the government took away the approval for that water bottling plant to take that land. So this is an example of a Kiai really being on the forefront of a movement to protect communal resources, communal ways of living within a society against a kind of capitalist or commodification of water resources. And this picture on the left is a picture of one of the springs that they saved by their activism. The picture on the right, on the other hand, is another pesantren, which is in East Java, in Lamongan, which is the pesantren Sunan Derajat, which is named after one of the famous saints in Java. And the Kiai of this pesantren had a vision of the saint, who told him that this tree in this picture, which is called the candlenut tree or the kemiri tree, is actually a blessing for the pesantren, and it should be considered to be used for the pesantren as a source of energy. And so this led the Kiai to support the community and the pesantren to plant these trees all around the area, and then to use the fruit of the tree can be used to make oil, to make minyak. And so they, which can be used for biofuel, which can be used for cooking and different things. So they actually created a movement to do that. And then they also engaged in different other types of conservation activities and other things like ideas they call santrepreneurs. So santries who are entrepreneurs and starting new businesses. And what's interesting about this, and this comes from a study by Ulil Amri, who was a really excellent anthropological study of this pesantren. And what Ulil notes in his study is that the santri and the kiai, to some extent, they look at the trees as giving them pahala, a reward. But the pahala is not only spiritual, it's also an economic reward. So if they follow the way of living with nature, then it means that there will be an economic benefit for the pesantren and also for the wider community. But what this talks about then is a real sort of synthesis between a sort of capitalist or neoliberal way of looking at the economy and the environment. So what we have here in these two cases are two kiai who are taking both employing eco-religion, but taking very different approaches and what that means. What are the philosophies? What are the economic concepts or ideas that are embedded in this eco-religion? And one ends up being a kind of resistance against capitalist expropriation, whereas the other one ends up being a more synthesis between capitalist or neoliberal concepts of advancement and environmental protection. So this shows us the real sort of ambivalence of what eco-religion can look like. So recognizing that then, what does it mean to have an ethical eco-religion, and how do we decide if there is an ethical eco-religion? So then that, there are probably about 100, I think, approximately, by the latest studies by Mangunjaya and Sofian, and also by my friends at PPIM in Jakarta, where they've been looking at this as well. About 100 institutions at least, which can be called eco-pesantren, but each of them have their own philosophy. What does it mean to be an eco-pesantren? Does it just mean that you recycle bottles, or does it mean that you have a kind of ideology or a perspective of living with nature that is more relational? And how does that apply to the way the pesantren does business or the way they relate to the community? So we have this debate between, we could say, almost an eco-capitalism and eco-socialism within eco-pesantren about what is a pesantren, what does an eco-pesantren mean? Then the case that I mentioned at the beginning about nickel mining in Raja Ampat. So this is an example that you have a real strong disagreement, not only between environmental activists and the people who want to mine, but within religious communities. So you have religious leaders who are taking very strong positions on both sides of the argument. Some who are promoting the mining as being even a blessing or a gift from God, and others who are saying the mining is actually destroying the environment, that humans as the Khalifa al-Ard, as the carers of the world, should not damage. So you have this debate. But not only is there a debate amongst religious leaders, there's a debate amongst the local community. And I don't know if you saw this, but there's one community in Raja Ampat that when the mining concession was removed from a nickel mine, they protested it and they said, we weren't consulted. We want there to be nickel mining because our community in Papua and Raja Ampat benefits from the mine. And we don't think we've been listened to or heard. And so what this means is that we have a real contestation, a real division between the different communities, not only within religious communities, within Adat communities, within local communities. And this kind of contention raises a question about what is ethical mining. Then, of course, we have the famous one within a religious community, which has been talked about the tambang ormas, or the mining concessions for religious organizations. And again, you have very strong positions of people within the same organization saying we support it or we oppose it, or we support it or oppose it in different ways. So the question to ask then, and what I'll talk about for the rest of this talk, is what can we learn from ecofeminism, from the theories of ecofeminism about these debates that can help us to understand what's going on in this situation and what is an ethical way to respond. So I'm going to look at then ecofeminism as being an ethical framework to kind of look at and challenge eco-religion. So I'm going to speak about two big figures in ecofeminism who know a lot more about it than me. One is from India. Most of you have heard Vandana Shiva, and her critique of, we could say, nature. I mean, of capitalism, but also her critique of religion is that we've been taken over by a Western scientific approach to nature, which views it as a material object for human benefit. And this way of looking at nature as a material object has caused environmental damage, has caused violence, has caused so many problems in society. And the result of that is what she calls a maldevelopment and also an idea of poor development and an extractivism, a way of looking at nature as extracting. And what she calls these, Shiva calls these a result of patriarchal ways of living with nature. So this doesn't just come from looking at nature as a dead material object, but also comes with the idea that humans have the right to dominate nature, have the right to control nature, have the right to take from nature what they want, regardless of what nature wants itself, what ecosystems want. What they want doesn't matter. What matters is what we as humans want to take from nature. And this, she says, is an example of a patriarchal way of living with nature. And so in response to that, she proposes feminist ways of relating to nature. And she says these are needed so that we can heal the problems in our planet. And those feminist ways of relating to nature are really embodied in women-led environmental movements, which we can see all across the world, in India definitely, and also in Indonesia, but also in how women in particular struggle for survival, struggle to live with nature as it's being destroyed and damaged, and struggle to present ways of living with nature that are different than what have been given and imposed from outside. And she sees these as really important examples for a way of living with nature, which is not only for women, but can be for everyone. And then a second person who I'm very honored, I think, is in the room with us, Bu Dewi Chandraningrum. She's probably the leading person on ecofeminism in Indonesia. So she could say a lot more about this than me, but I'm going to just mention that what I really appreciate about her perspective is that she presents a real Indonesian idea of ecofeminism, which is a locally rooted response to both patriarchy and not only patriarchy, but also the kind of secular Western idea of feminism, which, as we know, has been critiqued not only outside of the West, but even within the West by minority communities, by queer communities, by minority, Black and ethnic minority communities as being not very, being very secular and not understanding about diversity in religion and culture. And one of the quotes that I really love from a recent book that Bu Dewi edited and also wrote a chapter in is when she says that feminism has tended to regard religion as the main cause of women's oppression, through which practices against women's well-being and rights are legitimized and naturalized. Whereas this is the case, often many Muslim women in Indonesia, and this is from Bu Dewi's own research that she's found, see their spiritual lives, both individually and collectively, as sites of resistance and liberation. So this is the religion or the spirituality of women in this case are actually a site for liberation, a site for resistance against these patriarchal ways of living with nature. But at the same time, she says, Islam is contested and discussed amongst Muslim females and within movements, for example, with a range of intermediate positions and a multiplicity of voices, giving rise to creative possibilities as well as to open-ended contact zones and narratives. So what she's painting here, and I have to say this is what we found in our research as well, is that when you get down to the grassroots and you talk to people who are environmental activists in their local community, so as Bu Dewi's research with local communities, often led by women who are responding to river pollution in Solo as a result of industrial waste from the fabric industry, they're not presenting just one response to the difficulties of what they're solving, but they're also contesting, they're discussing what does eco-religion look like in our context? How can we balance the fact of needing jobs and business with the fact that this huge damage is being done to our ecosystems, which is also providing us life. And they're really discussing and developing multiple ways, multiple voices and ways of living. And this space for possibility is where the religious creativity can come from, and not only come from, but then be contested and be discussed and engaged with and debated about. And that's where the ethical approach can come into it from this perspective. So just to kind of illustrate that, I want to give two quick examples about this, also from some really excellent young researchers who've been doing work on ecofeminism in Indonesia, and I'll mention them as I talk. The first one is Kania Beneng Ramai. I always forget to say her last name wrong. Sorry, Kania Rahmainya. Sorry, Rahmainya. Kania is a young researcher who's been involved in a book that I've been editing with Samsul Marif and Whitney Bauman about religion and decolonization. And she wrote this really excellent case study about Dal Resik, which is a movement in Central Java and Yogyakarta that inspires and supports people to reuse waste, all their waste, in new ways, in creative ways. And they've been running for about 7 or 8 years, and it's set up and run by a group of young people who started it as a social enterprise. And they're a mixture. Most of them are actually women, but some are men. And they try to look at waste in a new way, that everything that we consider waste actually has a value. And by acting this out, by living out the value with waste, so they set up recycling or reusing centers all around Jogja and these other parts, 4 other cities in Central Java. And people can come, and I've been before, as you can see in this picture, come and bring all of their kind of separated and sorted waste, which they're trained and taught on how to separate to make it have the most value. And then it can be valued. So Dal Resik will then say, okay, this amount of plastic is worth this many rupiah, this amount of metal is worth this many rupiah. And with that money, you could either take it for yourself, or you could donate it to their program, which promotes education among schools and how to manage waste within schools. So what we see here is a really different approach to looking at waste than just a simple recycling plastic. What I would call this is, and this is what Kania mentions in her article, that they're actually reframing waste management with an ecofeminist approach. And they don't have just a 3R approach to waste, so reduce, reuse, recycle, but they have what Kania calls an 8R approach, which is rethink, reduce, reuse, recycle, but also refuse, recover, repair, and regift. And what they're highlighting here is that actually it's not just looking at waste as like, oh, well, it's a bad thing, so we need to do, we either need to not use it or get rid of it, but they actually look at it and say there's a different way we can reframe how we as humans relate to nature. And because of that, Kania says that Dal Resik represents an ecofeminist approach to nature because they promote a vision of human-nature relations where waste is reframed as something with value as long as it is cared for. So the idea is that if we as humans care for our waste, it then doesn't become waste anymore, because something which has a real value, which has a real benefit for us and for society. So it's on us as a society to challenge and reframe how we think about waste from this kind of ecofeminist approach. One other example, and I think I saw that she's also in the room, which I'm really happy to see. One of the students from CRCS has just recently defended and about to publish a thesis about Sasi Laut in Raja Ampat, so in the same region where this debate about mining is going on. In this location in Raja Ampat, as we know, the debate about mining is driven by the fact that it is one of the last few healthy biodiverse coral reefs in the world, which is done much better than the ones in Australia and other places which are suffering. And it's it's directly threatened by mining. But not only is it threatened by mining, it's also threatened by overfishing of around coral. It's threatened by other types of lack of kind of management, and of course by climate change as well. So there's a movement for setting up, reviving a system called SASI, which is a traditional system in Maluku and also in West Papua, which is used by Adat communities to manage both land and coastal resources through a process of implementing a SASI, which means that when there's a SASI, you can't fish, you can't cut down trees, you can't harvest, you have to leave things where they are so that nature can recover. And then at a appointed time, when the SASI is released, then you can go and you can then fish and you can do that. So the idea is to kind of try to keep a sustainable balance between people and nature through this system. So there's been a revival of these systems in villages all across Raja Ampat. One of them is in Misul, an area of Misul, which is where Justina, who's the student, also known as Utin, did her research in one village in North Misul called Adoe. This picture is actually from a different women-led movement because there are now about 4 women-led movements within this SASI system. And in her case of this village, they didn't really have a very active system, but the system was revived first by a group of women, and the group of women in the group, they were called Jumjak Sasi, and they developed a system for managing Sasi. They were given a piece of land from the village, not as much, piece of land, a bit of the coast that they could manage. And they were also given boats to help them monitor it by an NGO, IKAN, the Nature Conservancy Trust. And they started to work in managing this land since the year 2002. And what's interesting about this case is that from the example of this group of women, they then encouraged the rest of the village to also start to adopt this way of dealing with their coastline. So now there are 3 SASI groups in this village of about 64 households. So we're talking about a very small village. But what's different about the women's group is that even though they have a very relatively small bit of land, a bit of sea to manage, and they don't get a lot of economic benefit from that bit of sea, their way of managing the sea is different than what the other groups are, because they really focus on trying to maintain the balance with the nature so that they can harvest sea cucumbers and lobsters in an equitable way. But also, because they are drawn from all of the village, they try to use the resources they have to benefit everyone in the community. So they don't just take the profits for some people involved or the people who are fishing. They share the profits throughout their members to help the members who need things. They share the profits with groups within the church, that's the local church that's involved in supporting the process, the groups that are, do work in the community. And so they're trying to really spread the benefits, so develop the collectivism of a system that's really supporting the whole community. And this is, I think, what both Shiva and Abu Dewi would call a kind of an ecofeminist approach. Not only because they're women, but because the way that they're doing SASI is embodying this idea of ecofeminism, that is a connection with nature, living well with nature, but also living well with humans and being sharing and collective rather than being extractivist and just trying to take profits, trying to live in a way that lives well with nature and is sustainable for a longer period of time. And what Justina says in her thesis, and I've got a couple of quotes here because I thought they were really good, is that the management of natural resources in this kind of approach to SASI could be called ecofeminist because, she says, it's collective, because it's caring, and because it's equitable. And so what she says is that the element to make the SASI system effective, profitable, and equitable, so all 3 of those, so environmental, and economic together, is the connection between the communal approach and the involvement of women for equitable conservation. And because of that, she says it's important to use gender analysis in studies of conservation and indigenous peoples to understand how gender roles and identities influence fair and equal conservation efforts. Because there's a movement toward conservation in Raja Ampat, as we know, but the conservation isn't necessarily for the community. It's conservation so that tourists will come and spend a lot of money in Raja Ampat as ecotourists. But in a sense, the benefit for that type of conservation is the tourist and the companies who run the tourism industry. But how about the people who are living there, who live off of that, off of the benefits from what comes from the sea? And so by using this kind of gender analysis, Justina was able to really understand and engage with the ideas of what does it mean to live well with nature as a community, not only in a way that is good for nature, but that is good for the local community, that rebuilds a positive relationship, and also can challenge patriarchal ways of living and being, which exist in all societies, but also in Raja Ampat. So how do those things kind of fit together, and how can they work in a positive way? So being aware of the time, I'll just move to a brief conclusion, and then I'm looking forward to what we can have from our discussion. So the conclusions I'm drawing from this so far, and questions that hopefully we can discuss. One is that I think ecofeminism can provide an ethical framework for eco-religion, because we really need an eco-religion, and in our studies that me and other people are doing, to critically examine patriarchal and extractive relationships with nature in eco-religion. Because a lot of ideas about what green religion or green living is, when we look at them critically, we actually find out they're just using the same extractive approach and separative and dominating approach to nature that were being used previously. But they're called green, but when we look at them critically, we can see actually what's happening is not so different than maybe what happened before. But also what we can do through using an ecofeminist lens is we can present lived examples, like the example of Daresik, of Jumjak Sasi, like the example of the community in Budewi's research, who are resisting and fighting against the pollution in their rivers. Lived examples of relating to nature well, which are led by women in local communities, because these examples show us ways of living with nature that we can learn from, that policymakers hopefully could and should learn from, that we as academics could and should learn from. So because of that, I think we could say ethical frameworks such as ecofeminism, but also I think we didn't talk about it as well, but the other ones, ecosocialism, decoloniality. There are a lot of other frameworks, also queer theory, which can really help to guide and help us to reflect on how our community is responding to the environment, to the environmental changes, and how our governments and corporations responding. And these frameworks can really be useful for this kind of analysis. So because of that, I have two small recommendations that we can hopefully think about and discuss. One is that religious communities and environmental movements, I think, should promote more open discussion about religious and environmental ethics in the face of these new challenges. And that's why I really appreciated that debate. I know it caused a lot of the debate about whether mining is a blessing and whether environmental activists are Wahhabis or not. I think it opens a public debate about this question, because it's important to have the discussion. What is ethical when we talk about mining? What is enough? How do we relate to nature? So I think these kind of open discussions, hopefully with more depth and rigor, can happen within communities, but that these need to happen so that we can continue to think ethically about what's happening in response to these challenges. But also I think, and this was mentioned by at the beginning, that we should adopt, as researchers, I think about how we can adopt ecofeminist and decolonial methodologies in how we do research and how we work with communities. Because we have a problem, I think, in academia, and I'm definitely as much responsible for this or struggle with this as anyone, that we want to, as researchers, go and extract our own data. We want to extract our research and findings from communities. And I think we have a problem that we tend to potentially reapply the same patriarchal way of that we might critique in our own approach to how we do research. So I think there's a real need for us to adopt ecofeminist and decolonial methodologies. And on that note, I think the research that Mbak Andi and her team at Generate and Leeds have done about gender and climate change is such a good example of trying to adopt, not just talk about ecofeminism, but adopt an ecofeminist approach and how they work with communities in how they share the knowledge from the research, thinking about who benefits from the knowledge. How can communities be the beneficiaries and lead in the process of knowledge creation? And I think that's something that we need to do more and more, and that's something I hope we can encourage to happen more from our position at CRCS at UGM. So I think I've spoken enough now. I'll end with that, and I really look forward to all of your comments and reflections. And again, mohon maaf atas kesalahan kata-kata dan pendapat, and I look forward to all of your corrections and discussions as we go. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Pak Jo, for your insightful and thoughtful presentations. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Pak Jo. Everyone, we are now open the floor for questions and discussions. Please feel free to raise your hands or share your questions in the chat box, and I will help facilitate the dialogue. And then also, all of you can write the questions in Bahasa Indonesia, yeah, because Pak Jo also able to speak Bahasa. Yeah, campur-campur ya Pak Jo. Okay. Yeah, we already have some questions on the chat box. We have Nurfianto. Pak Nurfianto, would you like to ask your questions directly to Pak Jo? You can unmute your microphone, or I can help you to read the questions for you. Pak Nurfianto, silakan. Kalau mau dibacakan pertanyaannya langsung, disampaikan pertanyaannya langsung ke Pak Jo. Oh, yeah. I understand that his connection is not good enough. So, Joe, the first question is from Novianto. He said that I want to ask some questions to Dr. Jonathan. First question, how do eco-religious rituals and practices foster ecological consciousness that reshapes how communities relate to the food, water, energy nexus? That's the first question. And then the second one, I would like to get a deeper insight into eco-feminist activism in relation to colonial and post-colonial events and policies. What is your view on this? Thank you. That's the first question from Novianto. I think, would you like to answer one by one, or we can collect at least probably 3 questions?
Whichever you prefer, but Andy, it's you can run how you prefer.
Okay. I will read another question here. Then you can respond. The other questions is from Sukirno. Sukirno, would you like to ask your question directly to Pak Jo, or I can help you to read? Okay. I will try to read the question from Pak Sukirno. Yeah. My name is Sukirno from the Open University. Mr. Jonathan Smith, how do you think eco-religion and eco-feminist activism can play a role in addressing environmental damage caused by patriarchy and capitalism, and how can these two concepts be integrated into religious practices and environmental activism to achieve environmental justice and gender equality? So yeah, Jonathan, you have 3 questions already. I think I will give you time to answer. Please.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Yeah, terima kasih to Nurfianto and Sukirno for these questions. They're really good. So maybe I'll start with the yang pertanyaan kedua from Nurfianto and the question from Sukirno. I think because it's connected, that the like gimana komunitas ekofeminisme merespons ke patriarkalisme dan kapitalisme. I think that and also from colonialism as well. It's very, I think that the importance of seeing the research at the local level, when we look at the national level, it's maybe difficult to see, to understand the way that these practices are being embodied. And so I think the studies that we have, like the study from Mbak Andy about communities in Northern Java, fishing communities, helps us understand the connection between ecofeminism and the response to patriarchalism and to extractivism or capitalism, because the communities in these cases are suffering from all of them. So the communities are, like komunitas menderita dari semua faktor itu, dan dampak sangat besar dari, dari faktor-faktor itu, dari, kolonialisme, dari kapitalisme, and juga dari perubahan iklim, or, environmental damage. So, and from patriarchalism. So seeing how the communities embody it, it's something that we can really, I think, understand through the case studies, because the response has to be very local. Because one community, activism may look very confrontative, a lot of demonstrations, a lot of, kind of public resistance. Like, for example, the women of the Wang Sikap who are resisting against mining in Kendong, their approach may take a more, demonstration kind of, upfront way. But then another community, like, a fishing community, might involve a response that is more subtle, that's more embedded in the community, similar to the story of from Justina about the system of Sasi in Raja Ampat. So I think the way that we can really see the connection is we need to go to communities and really listen to them and spend time with them and learn from them, because in reality they are doing this already. They are providing the examples that we need, and the problem is that as researchers we don't maybe spend enough time listening to and learning from and being guided by them in order to find out how this connection happens. So I think that's the challenge for us who are researchers, is to listen more. And I think for activists as well, for environmental activists, often we become focused on a specific issue. So I think this is a good example, the example about Raja Ampat and the mining. If we just want to stop mining, nickel mining, it also means that we will, in some extent, hurt the economy of Raja Ampat. Now, maybe the economy comes at a cost for the environment, but also that economy is being depended on by some people in Raja Ampat. So when we look at not just the issue from one lens, from one perspective, mining or not, but look at it through how can people live well with nature? How can people, and that may involve, okay, we need to resist mining, but what can replace that? How can people live in a place that has been disadvantaged and marginalized for years? So it's this kind of larger lens which I think helps us to think about that. And then the other question from the second question from Norfianto. Sorry, I've gone into English too much. I should try to. I can't understand Bahasa, but I think my Bahasa brain is tired today. Maaf, yeah. Insight into the sorry, about the rituals. Yeah, ada salah satu komunitas yang di CRCS kami melakukan riset dengan mereka, namanya komunitas Resan, atau juga dua komunitas, satu komunitas Resan, satu lagi namanya Nandur Banyu, dan they are dua komunitas yang melindungi sumber air di Gunung Kidul. And mereka menggunakan eco-ritual baru, namanya gelangse, which is a kata-kata Jawa, and I'm not good in Bahasa Jawa, but which is using the, like, wrapping the trees. So they make they menggunakan kain, and they like wrap the pohon beringin dan pohon-pohon namanya resan, which is pohon sebagai rekso atau raksasa ecosystem. And this ritual is like a mixture of Javanese tradition, but also Islamic tradition. And they try to use it as a way to change the perspective tentang pohon-pohon besar and ecosystem sumber air di Gunung Kidul. So the rituals are a way to kind of embody and live out this idea of the connection between water, for example, as the water as the basis for life, but also the basis for sistem pertanian, karena air sangat penting untuk pertanian. So that's the connection between air, makanan, and a healthy ecosystem. And so there are many rituals. There's Niadran, there is Merti. We have Merti Dusun in a lot of places in Java, but also they have Merti Talaga, Merti Sumber, Merti Kali. And these traditions are also about thinking how we can live well with water and how we can reframe how we live with water. So I think, ritual punya like sangat penting untuk like revitalisasi sistem tentang melindungi alam. And there are ada banyak ribuan lebih banyak contoh tentang ritual-ritual seperti itu. So it's a good subject to study. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pajo. Some of the participants just texting me because my voice is not clear enough previously, so I just turned off the video now. So hopefully now it's okay, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's good. I can hear you fine, yeah.
All right. So we have 2 more questions, I think, in chat box. And everyone, please raise your hand if you want to directly ask your questions to Pak Jo, ya. First questions from Gina. She said, "Hi, Pak Jo, thank you for the presentation. I'm curious whether you have also explored the adverse ecological impact of imposing religion. For example, I just recently found out that Orang Rimba in Jambi, an indigenous group in southern Sumatra, are being pressured to convert to Islam with promises of equal access through KTP or Kartu Tanda Penduduk Indonesian ID card. However, they can no longer eat their usual food, such as pigs from the forest, as it's prohibited in Islam. Yet they struggle to find alternative as the forest is gradually turned into palm oil plantations. Yeah, that's question from Gina. And then it's okay, yeah, one question more. It's a bit longer. The other question is from Ifti. Thank you very much for the enlightening presentation, Pak Jo. I'm Ifti, currently exploring ideas to write a PhD research proposal in intersectionality of faith and gender. My question is, from comparative perspective, how the varying theological and philosophical foundations of Abrahamic, including Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, Eastern, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, and indigenous religious tradition like Sunda Wiwitan, Penghayat, and Ahu Parmalim, including their views on creation, divinity, both immanent and transcendent, and humanity's relationship with the natural world, either challenges or provide resources for the core principles of ecofeminism, particularly in addressing the interconnection and intersectionality of women and trans women with nature. I hope you don't mind with my long question, Pak Jo, is this side. I think that's 2 long questions. Yeah, Joe, you can answer both questions, and then we can
Thank
go
you.
to another questions, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Yes, 2 really interesting and excellent questions from Gina and Isti. Gina, yeah, first of all, I think I didn't talk as much about the decolonizing religion. So in the same way that we want to look at a decolonial or ecofeminist approach nature or to ecology, we also, and this is something at Pusat Studi Agama dan Lintas Budaya, we focus on about dekolonisasi konsep agama. And not only from the perspective of Indonesia, but also globally, because the creation, dari studi agama-agama, kami paham yang the definisi agama itu juga dari perspektif science, which is about patriarchal approach, hierarchical approach between people, so that you have religions which are agama dunia, which are the official religions or the real religions, and then we have the other kepercayaan. So agama is like religion, and then kepercayaan is like, oh, it's not the same. And these concepts were created by academics, by policymakers, by colonial policymakers in Indonesia, like the Dutch, helped to create this distinction between agama and kepercayaan, and that's something that Mas Anchu or Samsul Marif writes about a lot in the idea of decolonizing religion. So there's a way of religion which is also patriarchal and imposing frameworks on local communities. Okay, to be encouraging people to convert, not only to convert, but to change their way of life, to change their in the case of Orang Rimba, as you said, to change their whole livelihood, their way of living. So, a way of analyzing these things is to look at it through a framework which is using an ecofeminist framework to look at capitalism and extractivism, but also from a decolonial framework to look at religion and how religion creates hierarchical relationships between the accepted or official and the unaccepted or marginalized. And I think this is one way that we can provide an analysis for this case, and hopefully to find a way to engage with it. And as we know, for Masyarakat Adat and for also Penghayat Kepercayaan, they have been very marginalized in Indonesia for a long time. And this marginalization is not only about just their practice, but also about their rights as citizens, the ability to have KTP that has their own belief on it, their ability to receive access to services, education. So all of these are challenges that are connected. They're not separated in the life of the community. So it's important to find alternatives, as you say, Gina. So, and for that case as well, Isti, I think that's exactly. I think the idea is that we want to see not looking at religion as being like just a help, but it can also be a barrier. So religion can be a support, and it can be, it can also be a hindrance for how people relate with nature, and especially when it intersects with communities that are marginalized. You mentioned trans women, or maybe Waria, or other communities which are marginalized, and they're often marginalized not only by society, but also by religion. So I think by using principles like ecofeminism, and maybe also these principles of decoloniality, also what's called homo nationalism is another phrase you might find useful. Homo nationalism, which means the idea that to be a citizen of a country, it means that it creates a hierarchy between being male, cisgender, and heterosexual. And this idea of that this kind of movement in society, which we see not only in the global South, but very strongly now in the US. We're seeing a very strong repression of trans communities. Also in the UK, where I'm based a lot of the time, there's been a lot of repression of trans communities. And this is an exact replication of this same problem, of this imposition of a kind of heteronormativity or homonationalism on communities. So by using this, looking at the practices of local communities, so let's say communities of Waria, there's another researcher named Puspa, who's in the book that's coming out soon, which is about the Waria community in Semarang. And she looks at this connection between their rights as Waria, but also how it fits with their response to Banjir Rob and other issues they're facing in Semarang. And that's also, I think, the focus of Mbak Andy's research. So I think I would recommend to speak with Mbak Andi for some advice about how to construct your research question because she's thought a lot about this issue. But yeah, I think definitely there's some important resources in religion and tradition, but we also have to use these kind of critical lenses to kind of and focus on what communities are doing and responding to. So not only the concepts, but also the practices and how they fit together. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Jo, for your answer. We still have two more questions. One question and then the other one just share their experiences. First question is from Listia Ayu. In your research, did you also look into how other communities practicing the eco-activism through arts and or literature? How do they do that, and how arts and literature could contribute to the eco-activism? That's question from Lista. And then the other one is from Chika. Chika said that in bahasa, mau share tentang Sumba. Sebelum masuknya agama Kristen ke wilayah Sumba, suku Anawaru di Luku Wingir menganut agama lokal yaitu Marapu. Penganut kepercayaan Marapu memuja arwah-arwah nenek moyang dan leluhur. Dan ritual-ritual keagamaannya yang lekat dengan alam. Misalnya, ada upacara sembahyang di hutan, di mata air, dan pohon-pohon besar. Walaupun ritual ini kini mulai ditinggalkan, masyarakat tetap memiliki hubungan spiritual yang dekat dengan alam dan patuh terhadap nilai-nilai kehidupan yang selaras dengan alam. So Chika just share her experiences in Sumba. Yeah, Joe, probably you can ask a question from Listia first, yeah?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Andy. Yeah, thank you, Listia. Yes, there is, I think, di setiap komunitas atau setiap kasus gerakan lingkungan yang kami, termasuk di studi kami, ada contoh tentang seni, from, pameran for like arts, music, poesi, graphic, design like logos, T-shirts. So I think the creativitas, and especially in Indonesia, the creativitas sangat terkait dengan seni ya, dengan karya seni. So I think it could be a really good study, and maybe Listia, maybe you can do a study for about this connection between arts and eco-activism because it's so important. In the community I mentioned, they Comunitas Surasan and Nandor Banyu, they do a lot of these artistic activities, and many of the members are artists, so they will do artistic sort of works to demonstrate the relationship with nature as part of their campaign. So I think it's so important. And I hope we can have more studies about the relationship between art and eco-activism. So please help us with this, Tia. And for Chika, terima kasih banyak atas membagi pengalaman dari komunitas Sumba, komunitas Marapu. Itu, I think, ya benar contoh sangat penting gimana kehilangan kearifan lokal, kehilangan tradisi adat bisa, it's alasannya, it could be alasannya dari kebijakan, but juga alasannya dari, from dari agama juga, so the agama Kristen is, one of the main, salah satu alasan bahwa kehilangan tradisi dan kearifan lokal dan juga sistem untuk melindungi alam di Sumba, ya. So this is, dari sejarah itu, but juga, termasuk sekarang. And now Merapu, I think mereka salah satu komunitas yang sudah punya like rekognisi dari pemerintah sebagai masyarakat adat dan juga mulai I think sudah 4 atau 5 tahun kalau tidak salah juga ada pendidikan pendidikan agama atau pendidikan kepercayaan sesuai tradisi Marapu. And this is like eksperimen baru. There's salah satu artikel tentang itu that from the book that is we're publishing from JR, Mas JR. But I think yes, it's a big, when the traditions, like for the Comunitas Merapu or from Orang Rimba, when the traditions are lost, maybe also it's penting untuk menarik untuk kami bisa melakukan studi tentang siapa di dalam komunitas mencoba inisiatif untuk merevitalisasi tradisi, untuk menciptakan tradisi baru juga. Mungkin ada situasi yang tradisi sudah kehilangan, tapi juga bisa menciptakan baru, bisa merevitalisasi tradisi itu. So itu menarik untuk melakukan studi tentang itu yang sesuai karena ada banyak aktivis-aktivis dan komunitas di dalam komunitas Merapu I know who are trying to mencoba merevitalisasi tradisi. So this also would be an important study untuk nilai-nilai kehidupan, as you said, and also the hubungan antara manusia dan alam. So terima kasih, Chika.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Pak Jo. There is no other question in chat box. I also would like to invite anyone who want to directly ask a questions to Pak Jo. You can raise your hands. I will try to have a look. Okay, there is another question from Gigi. Gigi, would you like to ask your questions directly to Pak Jo? You can unmute your microphone. Silakan Gigi kalau mau menyampaikan langsung dalam bahasa Indonesia nggak apa-apa. Pak Jo paham bahasa Indonesia.
Ya, bisa.
Bisa. Silakan Gigi.
Terima kasih Pak Jo, terima kasih Mbak Andi. Mungkin yang saya jadi penasaran adalah ketika saat ini kan isu mulai hype ya karena gara-gara yang beredar video yang tadi yang satu cuplikan yang ditampilkan oleh Pak Jo. Terus ketika Pak Jo melihat bahwa kan di media sosial sudah mulai banyak orang menyuarakan isu-isu lingkungan, tapi tiba-tiba muncul resistensi dari pihak-pihak yang merasa terganggu dengan suara-suara yang mulai ada kepedulian lingkungan di media sosial. Terus bagaimana menurut Pak Jo sendiri gitu? Mungkin itu saja, terima kasih.
Yeah, Pak Jo. So I try to translate it in English.
Oh, no, I think it's go ahead, please. Yeah, go ahead. I think I got it.
Oh yeah, okay. Okay, if you got it.
Pak Gigi, terima kasih banyak atas pertanyaan. Saya setuju ya, ada mungkin dua lapangan ya. Ada lapangan dari studi kami, which is komunitas, let's say komunitas lokal, masyarakat lokal, which is, mereka juga menggunakan sosmed, tapi ini untuk isu lokal lingkungan. Then we have lapangan kedua, itu, let's say, sosmed nasional atau sosmed internasional. And lapangan itu kontestasi sangat tinggi ya. Like, kalau satu orang, berbagi pendapat, langsung ada merespons keras ya, langsung ada resistance seperti bilang Pak Gigi ya. So I think juga itu mungkin mau strategi beda ya daripada strategi lokal. Dari lokal mereka punya mungkin pendapat bisa berbagai lewat sosmed, tapi juga punya relasi antara orang di komunitas. Tapi di sosmed, sosmed, komunitas, online, there's no, tidak ada relasi. It's just like opini, pendapat, also ada buzzers, ada banyak, orang yang punya, trolling and all of this. So it makes the discussion more difficult. Ya, lebih susah untuk punya, let's say, kedapatan produktif, ya. Kedapatan yang bisa, support kesadaran, meningkatkan kesadaran dan juga support lebih baik, hubungan antara manusia dan alam. So yeah, untuk solusi itu mungkin itu it's not my area. So saya tidak punya expertise but tentang isu itu, but I think it's yang penting is that it needs a strategy maybe more like dari like komunitas online yang bisa mendorong satu-satu and not just like karena satu individu masuk ke lapangan itu, it's like susah. So I think there's a need for more collective response collective tentang support pendapat, maybe you can say environmental or pro-ecology, in order to try to create a community. But also maybe, mungkin this lapangan sosmed online is maybe just susah untuk punya konversasi atau kedapatan produktif also. So it's also ini pertanyaan untuk umum, gimana bisa mendukung dan menciptakan ruang untuk kedapatan produktif tentang agama, ekologi dan alam online. And I hope maybe Pak Gigi bisa mendorong dan menjawab pertanyaan itu juga. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Jo. Pak Jo, probably I have one question for you, if it's okay. I have questions regarding the influence of national level environmental discourses. I just want to know from your experiences or from your research, how far these environmental discourses in national level, like, in your first slide, there is the leader of the big Islamic organizations in Indonesia that said very, looks like they do not support the local eco-religion practices, right? So I just want to know how far these discourses in national level influence the local eco-religion practices. Is it significant for community level, or sometimes I just thought, oh, probably community already disappointed with the state, with the big organization, so they just go ahead with all their creativity to protect their land, for example. So yeah, that's my questions, Pak Jo.
Yeah, terima kasih, Pak Andi. That's a really good question. I think, like you said, the debates on, like TV shows, like Kompas or, national debates don't necessarily stop or change the activism that's happening at the local level. But I think they often represent the fact that at the local level, there is a lot of contestation, a lot of debates also, but the debate is not conceptual. The debate is practical. The debate is like in the case of nickel mining in Raja Ampat, the debate is about who benefits from mining. Do the communities benefit and how? And who is hurt by mining? Is the mining hurting only the ecotourism industry, or is it also hurting the local community? And which local community is it hurting? And so this debate is not only just conceptual or theoretical, it's like their life. People are dying, are suffering because of this because of what's happening. So I think the contestation takes on a much more personal dimension. And I think maybe the national debate kind of reflects that rather than the other way around in terms of the debate. But I think in terms of the policy, the reason why there is so much nickel mining in Raja Ampat is because of the national green policy, right? The policy around green energy. And this is a policy which has been created internationally and then adopted nationally by Indonesia and then imposed locally. So this process, I think what people are responding to more on the ground, it's not the debate, but it's the impact of policies around energy, whether it's mining of coal or whether it's mining of nickel, how this impacts the local community on the ground. And that's where the debate is happening in people's, livelihoods and existence. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Pajo, for your answer. Is there any question from the participants? I will check the chat box. And then, you can raise your hands if you would like to share your comments, thought, or ask questions directly to Pak Jonathan, yeah? We have 76 participants right now. Yeah. Actually, there is Gigi also said that Pak Jo is there. Pak Jo, apakah nanti akan share PPT-nya? If you don't mind, Gigi want to learn more from your slides, I think. Yeah. Okay, there is another question from Aninda. Kak Aninda, please. Screen is yours.
I don't think I can turn on my video, but can you hear me clear?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pak Jo. Thank you for the intriguing talk. It's very interesting to hear about this, combination of ecofeminism and eco-religion. My question is actually about this mechanism. What could you, from the materialist point of view, what could feminist eco-religion contribute to existing tangible policy and property rights intervention, especially when it comes to collective actions and also structural economy, labor, those kind of things. This is taking from a materialist point of view amidst the modern religious institutional frameworks that currently really goes into this neoliberalism, neocapitalism scene. Yeah. So that's my question, if you get it clearly.
Yeah. Thank you, Pak Aninda. Yes. So I think, as I said, for about ecofeminism, I'm not very, I would want to defer to maybe Mbak Andi or Bumia or Budewi for more expertise on that. But the point, I think, from our perspective about looking at religion and ecofeminism and the relationship is that I think there's a difference between the environmental activism, which is just one issue, like, for example, clean the rivers or save energy or reduce carbon, which are very one issue things. And whereas I think what we see from the local examples is what's more like a lived ecofeminism, eco-religion. So where it's not only like one issue, but it's a whole system. So it's a system for farming. It's a system for managing a coastline or managing a forest. It's a system for collective land ownership, or a system for resisting against extractivism or corporate takeover. So when you have these systems, then you can more see a kind of let's say, like a response to the capitalist or patriarchal approach. So you have another system which is trying which is also kind of embodying a different way of living. So I think this example of Sasi Laut from Justina is a really good example of that, because it's not only just an idea about taking care of, konservasi Raja Ampat, but it's a whole way of life. It's the mata pencaharian for one village, how the people in the village can still live there, how they can still exist, how they can survive, and through a system which is conserving nature, but also providing enough benefit for them to continue living. And I think those are what show us it's a whole different approach to conservation, because we have the approach of conservation that's very top down, managed by the government or managed by NGOs, and is very even often looks at the local communities as a barrier or as a problem. But these kind of approaches that use systems, they can say, look, we are doing what you want to do. You want to conserve nature. We're doing it better than you would do. But our system is also designed to sustain our community and provide a livelihood. So in some way, I think that's a good example of, what could be considered, depending on how collective and how communal it is, which could be considered a kind of ecofeminist approach. And I think we need to do more study about those systems, because the systems are very complicated. When we talk about like sistem masyarakat adat, like termasuk, there is adat, there is adat law, there is adat system, adat courts, there are adat, land ownership systems, there are ecological systems. It's a very complicated system, and actually it's another system, a way of living. The system may also not be effective. It may have been damaged or affected by capitalism or by other forces in such a way, or by patriarchalism in a way that it's not effective anymore. But it's still a system that can be reformed, that can be revitalized. So I think looking at these systems provide a real response to the nationalist, national top-down kind of capitalist system. I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yeah,
Yes, that's
thank
very
you.
interesting. Yeah, I think also I think beyond the spiritual narratives, because religion in Indonesia, some religions might be very dominant and they're institutionalized, and they're another push towards the local religion, local beliefs also, right? So it's I think systemic approach for environmental conservation. It's a very good idea. Hope someone can continue other than you. Thanks.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Vananda. And a lot of people are continuing. So please, yeah, I think so. And like you said, I just say also that, yeah, like, the many communities like Islam Pesisir, like that Mbak Andy's looking at, the farming communities like that I've studied in Gunung Kidul, these are not like traditional adat, masyarakat adat, but they have the same systems that are very complex, very connected to nature, and really trying to live with nature and survive. And I think these kind of systems need more study, and how they connect to the beliefs and values of the community. So I hope we can all do more studies about this.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Pak Jo. Thank you also, Aninda, for your questions. Thank you also, Pak Jo. Pak Jo already shared his presentation on chat box columns. Everyone feel free to access it. Is there any question from the participants? Let me check. Yeah. Probably there is no other questions, Pak Jo. Okay. Yeah.
Could I ask a question if no one else has one? Lisa?
Question for who? For yourself?
For anyone to answer,
okay,
for anyone,
okay.
because I think there's a lot of expertise in the room. So maybe if it's possible, just to ask, kalau ada peserta yang mau sampaikan tentang riset sekarang melakukan tentang ekofeminisme, tentang komunitas lokal seperti itu, it would be interesting to hear about because I think in the room here there is a lot of research about this, and I want to hear what you are finding out yourselves. Bisa?
Iya. Oke, teman-teman, Pak Jo mengajak untuk berbagi yang punya riset terkait ekofeminisme atau komunitas lokal, silakan berbagi gitu ya. Mungkin bisa saling sharing ya. Langsung saja dibuka mic-nya, di-unmute kalau ada yang mau share. Adakah yang mau share? Atau jika belum ada yang mau share, saya share ya, Pak Jo ya. I will start to share my research project, but in bahasa, so everyone can understand better. Jadi riset saya di pantai utara Jawa Tengah, area pesisir, secara khusus di Kabupaten Demak, gitu ya. Jadi sebetulnya berkaitan erat dengan isu-isu religiusitas, karena Demak kota wali, Sultanate City, and then the first Islamic Kingdom in Indonesia ya, itu ada di Demak. Masyarakat di sana beradaptasi dengan kenaikan muka air laut dan bencana banjirop dengan berbagai cara. Tapi yang menarik sebetulnya bagaimana mereka tidak meninggalkan masjid dan makam untuk juga ditinggikan. Jadi masyarakat meninggikan rumah mereka, tapi masyarakat juga meninggikan masjid, musola, kemudian meninggikan makam. Karena masjid dan makam itu menjadi bagian dari identitas mereka. Ziarah ziarah atau visiting the graveyard is part of the identity for people in coastal Demak, Pak Jo. So they actually not only rising their house floor, but also rise the graveyard, rebuild the mosque. Dan itu menarik karena ada irisan antara tadi ya praktik-praktik keagamaan dan bagaimana masyarakat juga merespon secara community based respon ya atau community based adaptation. Mereka merespon banjirop dengan berbagai cara tetapi tidak meninggalkan tadi ya situs-situs keagamaan. Itu yang menarik sih, yang salah satunya yang saya temukan. Selain juga ada berbagai kelompok atau gerakan perempuan yang berusaha menyuarakan dan melakukan adaptasi sehari-hari ketika mengalami banjirop. Itu riset saya. Oke. Mungkin ada teman-teman lain yang mau share risetnya, apakah terkait dengan komunitas lokal, ataukah ada yang terkait dengan isu lingkungan, agama, begitu ya, silahkan.
Halo Mbak Andi.
Oh ya, silahkan Daniel.
Mbak Andi selamat siang menjelang sore ya. Pak
Ya.
Jonathan juga selamat siang. Mungkin di sini saya nggak mau share soal apa namanya, nggak share soal. Oh ya, sebelumnya perkenalkan saya Daniel. Saya apa namanya mahasiswa S2 antropologi UI. Kebetulan saya dapat infonya setelah lihat Instagram Mbak Mia. Mbak Mia kebetulan dosen saya. Mbak Mia untuk semester kemarin sempat ngajar di studi kritis pembangunan. Sebenarnya saya nggak share soal apa namanya penelitian saya karena mungkin penelitian saya nggak terlalu terkait dengan isu ini. Mungkin ada sedikit, saya sebenarnya backgroundnya jurnalis, but mostly I'm writing about fashion. Sebenarnya ada ketertarikan untuk melakukan penelitian apa namanya terkait gerakan apa ya activism in fashion gitu kan. Karena sekarang banyak desainer yang udah mulai apa menggunakan fashion untuk menyuarakan isu lingkungan, tapi mungkin saya di sini mau menyampaikan it's more apa ya topik ini more personal karena apa namanya karena ini ngebahas religion. Saya jadi ingat apa namanya I'm a member of a Presbyterian Church in Indonesia, uh, GPIB. Mungkin Pak Jonathan pernah dengar, Gereja Protestan Indonesia bagian Barat. Uh, jadi uh, nggak tahu, saya merasa beberapa tahun terakhir ini isu lingkungan sudah mulai apa ya apa namanya mulai intens gitu di diimplementasikan di gereja gitu kan. Salah satunya lewat sekarang sudah mulai banyak apa namanya seperti kayak bank-bank sampah gitu kan di gereja. Mungkin ini cuma untuk ngasih gambar aja karena tadi Pak
Ya.
Jonathan mungkin apa namanya lebih banyak memberikan apa gerakan-gerakan apa namanya aktivisme apa eh, lingkungan
Iya.
apa namanya di kalangan umat Muslim ya. Mungkin kalau di sini saya mau share aja apa yang eh, gereja GPIB sudah lakukan berapa tahun ini gitu kan. Ya salah satunya tadi ada bank sampah gitu. Jadi jemaat-jemaat yang mungkin punya ya let's say as simple as a botol bekas bisa dimasukkan di situ. Lalu nanti dari tim di gereja akan apa namanya mengolahnya atau nggak akan menyalurkannya ke mungkin ke ya kelompok-kelompok masyarakat yang memang bisa mengolahnya itu. Dan tak hanya itu, saya melihat ya 2 tahun terakhir ini kayaknya, ya 3 tahun mungkin semenjak COVID ya, apa namanya isu lingkungan itu juga dimasukkan di dalam tata ibadah gitu. Khususnya dalam narasi di apa ya pengakuan dosa ya di apa namanya di pengakuan dosa uh, when we like kan kalau dalam tata ibadah kalau di gereja saya itu kan kayak ada beberapa apa namanya bagian ya ada salah satunya ada bagian apa namanya pengakuan dosa gitu kalau kita ibadah setiap hari Minggu gitu di situ dinarasikan bagaimana apa ya kita mengaku dosa kita karena kita selama ini maksudnya telah berbuat buruk terhadap lingkungan sampai akhirnya ya kita seperti ya istilahnya ini kan alam adalah pemberian Tuhan gitu tapi kita menyanyiakannya atau enggak kita terlalu apa namanya eh, mengeksploitasi secara berlebihan gitu. Tapi menarik mungkin kalau ya mungkin ada penelitian juga kali ya melihat bagaimana se seefektif apa sih gitu kan eh, cara-cara tersebut gitu untuk menyadarkan jemaat gitu. Mungkin bisa dilihat juga bagaimana eh, kepartisipasian masyarakat atau nggak warga gereja gitu ya dalam konteks ini eh, ikut akhirnya ikut terlibat gitu di dalam aktivitas-aktivitas kayak tadi bank sampah gitu setelah adanya apa namanya dimasukkannya ya soal-soal isu lingkungan dalam narasi ibadah sih. Cuma itu aja sih apa namanya share saya. Thank you Pak Jonathan dan Mbak Andi.
Terima kasih Daniel
Sama Mbak.
sharingnya. Terima kasih Pak Jo, you got the not
Hopefully
the
Pak
question. You got
Yeah,
Jonathan
yeah,
yeah.
understand
yeah.
I speak in
Well,
bahasa Indonesia
bisa.
because
Oh,
mostly of the
mungkin.
participant is Indonesian
Ya,
so
ini
yeah.
Yeah.
ya, terima kasih Mas Daniel. Ya, no, just mungkin saya mau jawab ya. Terima kasih banyak atas memberi pengalaman itu dan juga I think ya saya juga lihat di riset kami that di gerakan mungkin di dalam umat beragama juga itu sangat penting dan sangat kuat di dalam like setiap tidak dari setiap agama, dari setiap umat beragama, setiap komunitas, setiap rumah ibadah, ada orang yang mungkin melakukan, aktivisme tentang isu lingkungan. Maybe you said mungkin recycling aja, tapi itu juga penting ya. Dan dari setiap aksi seperti itu, it's like how we can practice lived religion. Ya, gimana bisa melakukan lived religion from the theology, eco-theology. So ada eco-theology mungkin dari gereja GPIB. I know
Yes,
there are people
eco-theology
that
ya
do
ya
this.
ya. Ya itu dia
But there's
istilahnya.
eco-theology, then there is practic, ya, practic
Ya.
eco-theology. So then dari itu gerakan lokal itu sangat penting untuk to show how, gimana bisa menghidup, mempraktek eco-theology di dalam kehidupan sehari-hari. Yeah, so it's really great, and I hope this work can continue and it can do more.
Ya. Thank you Pak Jonathan.
Yeah.
Terima kasih Daniel sharingnya. Ada juga nih yang raise hand, Pak Jo Mikdam. Silahkan Mikdam kalau mau share.
Ya, baik. Terima kasih Pak Jo, Mbak Andi, dan rekan-rekan. Perkenalkan nama saya Mikdam. Saya alumni SKSG, KTTI, dan sekarang juga sedang studi lanjutan untuk doktoral di UIN Syarif Hidayatullah. Saya terima kasih sekali bisa mendengarkan pemaparan Pak Jo. dan juga tadi mohon maaf saya juga terlambat karena baru ingat gitu ya, tapi sejauh ini menangkap gitu ya. Mungkin ini sedikit sharing Pak Jo dan rekan-rekan, karena saya juga saat ini studinya tentang filantropi, Mbak Andi, Pak Jo. Ada beberapa riset yang cukup menarik ya, jadi beberapa donatur, katakanlah muzaki, kalau di lembaga zakat gitu ya, ketika dihadapkan beberapa prioritas tentang program SDGs, itu kadangkala masih minat untuk program yang bersifat planet ya, itu masih rendah gitu ya, dibandingkan dengan yang sifatnya sosial atau ekonomi gitu. Nah, cuman ternyata pada saat terjadi bencana gitu, donasinya cukup besar gitu ya. Jadi kadangkala di kita sendiri itu masih, kalau belum terlihat itu kayak belum sadar gitu ya. Nah, barangkali mungkin bisa Pak Jo bisa menanggapi kalau di lingkungan komunitas yang pernah Pak Jo amati gitu ya, pernah teliti itu seperti apa gitu ya dalam konteks filantropi atau katakanlah dermawanan ya atau kerelawanan begitu Pak Jo. Salam kenal sebelum Pak Jo. Barangkali nanti bisa kolaborasi. Terima kasih. Selamat siang.
Ya, terima kasih Mikdam. Pak Jo,
Oh
mau
ya, terima
merespon?
kasih. Ya, terima kasih Pak Mikdam. Ya, itu ya sangat ya, saya setuju ini sangat penting ya dari donasi dari zakat dari juga ya cara lain-lain untuk this dengan orang besar seperti itu juga ada kuasa ya untuk merespons komunitas agama beragama ya di isu lingkungan juga, and I think it's sangat penting ya. So it could be also mungkin itu juga salah satu tema riset di masa depan ya, or maybe sekarang tentang gimana donasi dari itu bisa juga sesuai dengan prinsip prinsip eco-religion atau eco-feminist religion could be an interesting subject. So, ya, terima kasih, Pak Miktam.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Mr. Jo.
Okay. So we have, I think, 3 more questions, Pak Jo. Yeah, I think the discussion is, it's getting deeper now. Okay, we have Fahmia Dia. I will read the question for you. Siang Pak Jo, terima kasih ilmunya. Bapak, kebetulan saya lagi research tentang pembalut kain. Hal ini akhirnya menarik saya ke pendekatan ekofeminisme tentang perempuan dan alam. Studi kasusnya di sebuah UMK lokal yang memproduksi pembalut kain untuk kesadaran perempuan lainnya dan perempuan komunitasnya sendiri. Bagaimana pendekatan ekofeminisme menjawab ini? Satu pertanyaan dari Fahmia Dia, kemudian ada sharing dari Ira. Ira melakukan riset di tempat yang sama dengan Mbak Andi, hanya saja fokusnya berbeda, fokusnya kepada kesehatan reproduksi perempuan-perempuan di desa yang terdampak banjirop. Lalu ada pertanyaan atau respon ya dari Kak Listia lagi. Hello Pak Jo and Mbak Andi, I'm Listia, a lecturer in English Department, Binus University. Last year, my colleague and I had eco-criticism research where we asked students, first and the second year student in English Department study and discuss literatures with eco-criticism perspective. They perform very good in dissecting the eco issues. However, in the second layer of research where we connect this class activity to real environmental activism project in our uni community service scheme, they are disconnecting and only do the project just to finish them, not even trying to connect with the issues and community who affected by the issues. Community or kelurahan in Jakarta Barat who had annual flood. We then realized that the literature we gave them at class do not really touch the local issues. It feels distant to us and our students. maybe I will give another change ya, kesempatan buat Nur, Kak Nur. Saya ingin berbagi sedikit tentang perempuan adat yang turut menjaga alam yang mungkin bisa diterapkan di pengajian-pengajian. Kak Nur mungkin bisa open mic, silahkan kalau ingin berbagi. Ini terakhir ya, sebelum nanti kita tutup. Silahkan Kak Nur.
Ya, terima kasih Mbak Andi. Selamat sore Pak Jo. Saya Laili, alumni antropologi UI, mahasiswanya Mbak Mia dulu. Saya sedikit ingin berbagi terkait dengan riset saya di akhir 2023 terkait dengan perempuan adat di Banten. Saat itu para perempuan di sana saat ada ritual untuk panen, mereka menggunakan bahan-bahan alam untuk bersyukur. Ketika saya ada di sana, saya melihat apa yang membedakan masyarakat adat dengan orang kota pada umumnya. Karena saya waktu kecil berada di desa, yang sepertinya tidak ada yang berbeda ya terkait dengan menggunakan bahan-bahan alamnya begitu. Nah, yang ingin saya garis bawahi di sini bahwa ketika ritual itu menggunakan bahan-bahan alam, misalnya seneknya, padinya, daunnya, itu sudah oleh anak-anak muda di sana itu anak muda sudah tidak peduli lagi. Nah, padahal penggunaan bahan-bahan alam ini dulunya di desa-desa itu seperti di pengajian menggunakan juga snack-snack yang semuanya dari alam. Nah, ketika saya kembali ke desa, kebetulan saya dari Kebumen, ibu-ibu pengajiannya itu masih ada pengajiannya, tetapi snacknya sudah menggunakan plastik-plastik. Nah, ini barangkali saya tadi menyimak yang dijelaskan oleh Pak Jo terkait perempuan memiliki peran yang sangat penting dalam menjaga alam. Ini mungkin bisa semacam kampanyekan kembali di ibu-ibu pengajian yang ketika ada perkumpulan dan sebagainya menggunakan bahan-bahan alam di snack dan makanannya. Mungkin itu yang ingin saya sampaikan. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih. Silakan Pak Jo jika ingin merespon.
Okay, I know waktu kecil ya, so should I maybe
Yeah.
do summary of some answers or what's?
Yeah. You can do summary.
Waktu
for
pendek.
all.
Okay. Well,
Ya.
pertama mau ya mengucapkan terima kasih banyak untuk kawan-kawan berbagai contoh sangat penting dan sangat bermotivasi saya untuk lanjut riset tema itu ya. So ada riset ya itu dari Mbak Nur, juga bagian dari Mbak Yuli, Mbak Gina, and juga ya Ira dan juga contoh dari Listia. So this is mungkin saya dapat amal dapat bersemangat ya dari contoh itu. So terima kasih atas berbagai dan semoga lanjut di riset seperti itu. Maybe tentang this like issue, I think isu khusus perempuan seperti what was it, the pembalut
Kain.
balut
Eko.
kain. Yeah, yang pembalut kain and also like Kespro itu I think this is a really good contoh baik tentang riset ekofeminisme because it's bisa lihat hubungan antara isu yang sudah maybe sudah dimarginalisasi oleh masyarakat, but an issue that there is ada solusi kreatif dari komunitas lokal or ada juga work to address the situation. So that is because the issues that are sangat penting untuk perempuan-perempuan juga isu sangat penting untuk masyarakat semua. So then this is a good way to have a ecofeminist research, yeah, from the dari perspective perempuan-perempuan dan isu juga. So I think it's good. And maybe I'll just mention for the contoh dari Mbak Listia, saya juga lihat mungkin dari idea like eco-criticism or criticism dari like ilmu kritisisme or critical theory, that we maybe have a tendency to be sangat theoretical because it's easy, sangat mudah to say, okay, extractivisme itu tidak baik. Or maybe we can say narrative green itu mungkin itu narrative bisa mendorong or mendukung korporasi besar, ya. Itu, but then gimana paham hubungan dari inti diskurs besar untuk kehidupan sehari-hari di komunitas yang sekarang sedang menderita dari dampak kebijakan itu. Seperti contoh bukan like contoh KKN, I think dari Mbak Lestia. So I think itu sangat penting is that we maybe need to um, mungkin kita bisa kerjasama untuk menciptakan materi kurikulum analisis baru that is sangat praktik, sangat mulai dari isu lokal, dari isu, isu that sangat punya dampak untuk komunitas lokal, and then learn, apply framework seperti feminisme, eco-criticism, but mulai dari perspektif lokal. I think maybe satu cara untuk masuk ke isu itu, dan juga untuk membantu siswa-siswa untuk merefleksikan baik tentang isu, but belajar dari komunitas lokal, tidak belajar dari kami seperti dosen, but belajar dari komunitas lokal, karena mereka bisa mengajar mungkin sangat lebih baik daripada kami tentang isu itu. Terima kasih ya.
Ya, terima kasih banyak Pak Jo, terima kasih teman-teman semua. Mohon maaf tadi ada yang raise hand juga karena waktunya juga sudah sedikit ya, tadi Pak Jo sudah berakhir, udah jam 3 sore. Di sini di kolom chat juga ada Kak Yuli Ana ya yang berbagi ceritanya, mungkin bisa dibaca saja. Saya mengucapkan terima kasih ke Pak Jo dan kawan-kawan sekalian atas engagement-nya hari ini gitu ya. Juga ternyata Pak Jo diskusi tentang agama, gender, kemudian komunitas lokal itu sangat luas ya. Ada ruang yang luas untuk bisa dieksplorasi di masa depan gitu ya, baik dalam riset maupun proyek-proyek maupun tadi ya terakhir terkait kurikulum. Jadi saya pikir ini isu yang bisa nanti kita diskusikan lebih lanjut di masa depan begitu. Saya mewakili program studi kajian gender Universitas Indonesia dan juga klaster riset perempuan, kaum muda, gender, disabilitas, dan inklusi sosial di SKSG UI. Kami mengucapkan terima kasih banyak dan juga mohon maaf Ibu Mia, Kepala Program Studi Kajian Gender, belum bisa hadir di penutupan karena sedang menguji gitu ya sidang tesis mahasiswa begitu. Sekali lagi terima kasih Pak Jo, terima kasih teman-teman, dan saya ingin mengingatkan minggu depan di hari Kamis kita akan ada diskusi lagi. Kita akan berdiskusi bersama Kak Anissa Beta gitu ya dari Melbourne University dengan topik digital citizenship dan girls gender empowerment di Indonesia begitu. Saya tunggu kehadiran kawan-kawan sekalian untuk diskusi-diskusi selanjutnya. Dan semoga kita bisa saling belajar bersama. Terima kasih banyak Pak Jo, terima kasih teman-teman. Thank you everyone, thank you Pak Jo.
Terima kasih Mbak Andi, Bu Mia, dan semuanya. Semoga ketemu lagi ya.
Terima kasih Mas Jo, matur nuwun.
Oke, Bu Dewi. Terima kasih, matur nuwun.